From SOILveR, I would like to welcome everyone here this morning. Great that you're joining on this EU-related topic and from a lot of different countries. Always great to have such a diverse group. I think everyone has probably seen these house rules by now, but just to remind, you can use the chat if you have any questions. And this meeting will be recorded, also to make a message for you to later check up on our website with a short summary of the meeting. And later on in this meeting, we'll use Mentimeter, but we'll provide you with more details on this later. Next slide, please. Yeah, so probably you've all seen the title, but today we'll be talking about soil certificates and soil passports. This is a topic that has already been touched upon with the European Commission as well. But today we're trying to broaden the topic and to talk about it with more European countries. Next, please. Ingrid. Just a short introduction on SOILveR. Maybe some of you already are familiar with us, but we're a permanent self-funded platform. And we work with two pillars. One of them is knowledge development and the other one is knowledge exchange. With knowledge development, we look at pilot calls. We did one in 2019, which was very much focused on emerging contaminants and microplastics and soil health. And the target of SOILveR is really to look at targeted knowledge actions. So which actions are missing on the topic of soil, and then to focus with budgets on that, where we are cross-border collaboration. So we bring together research from different countries to give different perspectives. And the topics are often related to the soil strategy. So you can see a list here, what is in our line of interest. Next, please. What we've been quite active on recently is the pillar of knowledge exchange. In 2020, we did an online PFAS workshop. And last year, we've been having a lot of coffee break meetings with short presentation from a researcher and a discussion afterwards. A LED webinar, and at the start of this year, we had a final meeting with our pilot calls. Information on these pilot calls you can find on our website as well. And the last couple of months, we've been really looking at the EU soil strategy, knowing that there's going to be a proposal for a directive next year. And we've been having, up to now, this is the third stop, some online meetings on soil monitoring schemes in Europe, on sustainable land use. And today we're focusing on the issue of soil certificates and passports. Next. So a short overview of the program for today. In a bit, we'll have a showcase on how certificates and passports work in Wallonia, looked at it from legislation and implementation perspective. Then we'll move on to the map of Europe. We've sent out a questionnaire to our network, and we've gotten a couple of answers on soil certificates and passports and how they're being used or not used in several countries. And that kind of tour de table will be introduced by a couple of presentations from countries on their systems. And then at 11:40, we'll continue with an open discussion, and we'll be using Mentimeter to get all your opinions. And then it says 12:30, might be a little bit earlier, we'll have a wrap up. And then you can all hopefully continue your weekend with some inspiration in the back of your mind. Next. Then for now, I'd just like to introduce the topics of today quite quickly. Most of you are maybe already familiar with it, but the European Commission introduced soil certificates in their soil strategy, basically saying that they want to look at the introduction of soil health certificates, which are really to be used for land transactions, with the goal of providing buyers really with more information. What are the key characteristics of their soils, and are they healthy or not? And if so, should more research be done? And we've provided you here with the way how the European Commission looks at healthy soils. Basically, they provide a balance of physical, chemical, and biological good condition. And so they can provide a lot of ecosystem services. I won't go through the list, but this is the sum up from the Commission. And this soil health plays through the soil certificate, but also through the passport. Next, Ingrid. Then the second topic we're touching on is the soil passport, which is on the topic of excavated soil, where the Commission is really looking what do member states have in place. So also what we're looking at today. And this passport should reflect the quantity and the quality of the excavated soil. It's really meant to give some more traceability and quality control. And it should be used for the transport, the treatment, or the reusement of excavated soil. And basically to keep contaminated soil from clean soil. So very much on the circular economy topic. Next, Ingrid. Well, today we'll be focusing on these two topics, but if anyhow you are interested in the work of SOILveR and you would like to contribute to this cross-border collaborations on knowledge development or exchange, here you find our information. So just have a look at the website or send us an email. Then I think I'll give the word to Esther for now.
Thank you, Rita. Good morning, everybody. I'm happy to be here with you, and we will present you how the system of soil certificates and passports work in Wallonia from different perspectives, from legislation perspective, but also from soil experts and from a brownfield regeneration organism. Next slide, please. So I'm Esther Guetz, and I'm working in the Walloon Administration of Environment. And then you will hear Frederic, which is working at FedExol, the organism representing soil experts in Wallonia and Brussels. And then Marie will also give you some insights, and she's working at SPAC in charge of mainly of remediation of brownfields. Next slide, please. So what we propose you is to first dig in the small, let's say, simplified soil legislation associated tools, such that you can understand the system. And then we will go through different implementation parts from soil experts and SPAC, and then have some reflections about how to move forward to a soil health certificate. The system we will be showing you is the one which is working right now in Wallonia. It has some advantages, but also some limits, and so we will be discussing that as well. Next slide, please. So soil legislation is quite recent in Wallonia. There is the soil decree that was adopted in 2018, and usually legislations are made of different parts. You set the objectives of protecting soil and restoring it. You get an implementation scope, which helps you to distinguish between the waste regime and the soil regime. But also here, the scope of that soil decree is mainly targeted on pollution issue. Then you get some terminologies. One to maybe to detail is that soil for us in Wallonia is soil and groundwater, such that we tackle both at once. Then I'll show you some mechanism, and then you can have in a law modifications of other laws. You get transition periods, entry into force. That was the case of the soil decree since the 1st of January 2019. And then some important annexes, some of them are shown here. We get annexes with soil thresholds that are divided by land uses. And also another annex that translates sort of that land use, which help us to define risk assessment scenarios behind. We translate those land use into categories of legal land planning legislation, and also to effective use that you would face basically when you are going up to a field. Next slide, please. So about the mechanism, I popped out the three basic building blocks, let's say. First, the database. We need a soil database, which we called in soil decree Banque de données de l'état des sols. And there is the feeding process of such database and some update, of course. Then I will go through obligations to inform on the soil quality you are facing with, and also obligations to do soil and groundwater investigation according to certain rules. And then a big important also building blocks is the actors that are active on that soil legislation. So beyond the administration, we have two main semi-public organisms, SPAC, in charge of mainly brownfield remediation, and ESEP, which is the reference laboratory. We get also an organism called SOILveR, which is in charge of the management of excavated soils. And then we get a system of certified bodies, and those are soil experts, laboratories, and soil samplers. Next slide, please. So first, the database. What is our database about? It's a geo-reference and centralized inventory of different administrative registers coming from different sources. One big source is, of course, the administration linked to environmental legislation. So beyond the soil studies that are coming from the soil decree, we also get information from the environmental and authorization permits for potentially polluting activities, because we define a list of potentially polluting activities through the soil decree. We get also information for enforcement reports, information from remediation plans, and also information from historical data. Another source of information is coming from the land planning legislation, where it is dealt with the recycling of economic wasteland, and some of them are potentially polluted, and so that information comes into the database as well. We have also the brownfield inventory coming from SPAC, and also, but not yet within the soil database, but it's a database apart, it's the data about all the management of excavated soils. The common piece between all those information is that it is provided at the cadastral parcel level. This is important because there you get the link to the liability of.
Lucia, buongiorno.
So cadastral parcels, you can have several of those into one site. So there are different terminologies.
Ah, okay.
Please, can
là quanto?
Mute himself?
In là quanto? Cioè quanti giorni là?
Ingrid, can you mute Federico Silvestri, please?
Sì.
So for the, you can get several cadastral parcels into one site, and so those notions are different. This database is publicly available on web. The owner of orders of parcels that are registered are informed, and if there are errors, there is a system for rectifications, of course, and there is an update weekly. It's also possible to get an official extract of the database, and it is automatically delivered, and it costs about 30 euro per parcel. It is delivered per parcel, and we call that document the BDS conform extract. This is a first kind of document which is very central to the system. Next slide, please. Thank you. So now what does it look like? This is the BDES, sorry, status database. So you can see that you can have all the cadastral parcel visible. We get two colors. One color is orange, and those are for the parcels for which soil management procedures have been done or have to be done. So that information is verified and important and can lead to some obligations further on. The blue parcels are the ones for which we have information, but this is only indicative. So there is no obligation on those parcels. For now, we have around 70,000 parcels in the register, in the soil database. And last year, we issued more than 200,000 soil certificates, or let's say BDS conform extract. So this is one system. Now let's go to the obligation. So next slide, please. Obligations. So two types. One is obligations, let's say the soil degree obligations, which are the ones when you go in situ and you do a site investigation in situ. The other one will be for excavated soils. So here, the investigation of soil and groundwater are done by a certified soil expert and is following a process, usual process first orientation study. So you need to identify potential sources of pollution. For those potential sources, you do soil analysis. If the results and the levels of pollutants are higher than the threshold value, then you need to go further and characterize the site. Otherwise, you get out of the procedure with a soil certificate. Then if you have pollution, you need to characterize it and to assess the existence of a risk according to the land use. If you don't have a risk, you get out of the procedures with a soil control certificate. Otherwise, you need to go for a remediation project where you will be defining the targets of your remediation and the techniques that should be used. When that project is validated by the administration, then you go to works of remediation and monitoring, and you go to a final assessment, which is then approved by the administration, and you get a soil control certificate. So this soil control certificate is really given after soil investigations. Next slide, please. When you go to excavated soil management, and it's more about soil traceability, I won't be in detail, go into the detail of the scheme here, but the idea is that investigations are still done by certified soil experts, and other actors are taking part also of the management. You get a site of origin where you are excavating. You get a site of reception, which is the receptor site, where you backfill your excavated soil. And the idea is to have a proportionate level of quality control and traceability. In case of a higher suspicion, then you need to do soil analysis, and it leads you to the deliverance of a soil quality control certificate and a soil passport, which allows you to trace the movements of your soils. This then is system is thresholds dependent because you have done some soil analysis. If it's less risky, let's say, you don't have to do that quality control, but you still need to keep that traceability. So you get only a soil passport, and this one is land use dependent. And then in some cases, you don't need such a procedure. This management is handled by Walter, and there is a big database over there as well. Next slide, please. Now, when are we informed on the soil quality? The idea is to stick to the life cycle of a parcel, and you can, in that life cycle, have some critical steps. The first step, and next slide, please, is you are put in a specific inventory, which is a static inventory, sort of. You are put on a list of priority sites because those sites are historically, or those are orphan sites, and those are polluted, and the government want to put a special action on that one. So you need to have good historical data. You need to prioritize which site you want to remediate and recycle according to the land planning dynamic. And you get budget for remediation and also then a final assessment. This system was previous to the soil decree, of course, so we get lots of reports on that. But then since the soil decree, we get soil control certificates out of it. Next slide, please. Now we go to dynamic inventory. That means that the triggers of actions are dependent on some critical moment of the life cycle of a parcel. The most critical moment is, of course, the transfer of land, or also the transfer of environmental permit. And there, the soil decree requires you to get a BDS conform extract. So it's not from soil investigation, it's just the extract of the database, such that the seller and the buyer have the same knowledge on the site, and it's up to them to decide if they want to do soil investigations or not. This system is slightly different than the ones in Flanders and Brussels, and so it's a small particularity. Next slide, please. Another critical moment is the change of land use. So when do you catch that one? Next slide, please. First, when you are doing a project under the land planning legislation. In Wallonia, we use urbanism permit. At that moment, you need to consult the soil database, and you can use conform extracts to do so. And for some situation, if you are in the register of the database and that you are having impacting works, or that you are changing your land use to a more sensitive one, then you need to do soil investigation, and so a soil control certificate is required. Next slide, please. Another way to tackle the change of land use is through environmental legislation, so environmental permit. At that moment, you also need to go and look in that database. And if you are in a potentially polluting activity list, you need to go further, have that conform extract, analyze the impacts, and in some cases, like the renewal of the permit or at the end of the activity, you need to do soil investigation and so have a soil control certificate. Next slide, please. We have mentioned already the excavation work with 2 types of document. Next slide, please. And we have the accident that can happen on the parcel of heavy threats. And of course, at that moment, you need soil control certificates. Next slide, please. So basically, when talking about soil certificates and soil passport, we have different types of documents. For soil certificates, we have like a basic document, which is just an extract of a database, which is automatically delivered. And that contains the cadastral parcel information, date of issuing, validity, what is your status in the database, and all the references to the administrative information and the potential reports and other information that have been collected for that site. It's so quite administrative extract, and it gives you what are the legal obligations. Where you have to do soil investigation, at the end of that procedures, you get either a soil control certificate or a soil quality control certificate in case of excavated soils. This is really issued at the end of the study by a certified soil expert. You get very detailed information, the levels of contaminants, the location, what are the restrictions of reuse, and this is downloadable from the soil database actually. This part is delivered by the administration after a human process, let's say. And so that those kind of soil certificates require higher human resources to be delivered, both from the soil experts, but from the administration as well. When you go to soil passport, a soil passport is more like a transport document where you get all the information of what are the parties involved in that excavation management. What is the site of origin, the receptor site, what has been excavated, the volumes, the characteristics of the batches, and so on. So this is what is basically about the soil passport that we use in Wallonia. Next slide, please. Now coming to the actors, I will leave the floor to Frédéric Braque, which will be introducing itself and tell you how they see it as well. Frédéric, please.
Great. Thank you, Esther. So hello, everyone. I'm Frédéric Braque, certified soil expert. I represent today our Federation of Soil Experts, FEDEXSOL, of which I am a member as administrator. Our federation, FEDEXSOL, in a few words, we include a large part of the soil experts active in Wallonia, and we are very happy to be able to share your feedback on soil certificates and soil passport with you at the request of the DAS, where I thank Esther in passing. So yes, we are working Wallonia for the following. At the request of your clients, we carry out soil pollution. Yes, sorry, Ingrid. Next slide, please. Yes, thank you. So voilà, FEDEXSOL, as it's right. Yes, we carry out soil pollution studies in Wallonia, soil and groundwater studies, from the assessment of the quality of a site to its remediation and final recovery. Our customers are very varied. So we have public customers, also private sectors, and industrial to real estate developers. So yes, for us, the application of legislation on case by case requires us to be creative and solution-oriented for claims. On this introductory slide, I am showing an image of the Wallonia inventory database called BDS. It's a first step for our customers to identify their obligation in terms of soil. A soil study necessary, for example, and within the framework of the administrative procedure, by example, permit application, land movement, and so on. So for us, the existence of a soil inventory is very fundamental in your business. Next slide, please, Ingrid. Thanks. Here, so in Wallonia, we therefore follow two sole aspects for clients: the application of the soil decree and the traceability of the soil. On this slide, we briefly review the application of the soil decree and the results obtained in terms of certificate closing the soil procedure. This is for year 2021. Yes, as you see, just under 950 official studies submitted to the administration and more than 7,000 hectares having been subject of a soil certificate issued by the DAS. Next slide, please. Yes, yes, thank you. And since the application of the soil decree in the year 2019, we look back on our experience on this site, both in terms of benefits for our clients and in terms of continuous improvement. So, as you can see, there are multiple advantages for customers because they have a city identity card. It's very important for them. They receive a soil certificate. It's an administrative warranty for owners, buyers, and compatibility of type of use for the site. And yes, the obligation, as you see, help us and help the government to speed up the soil quality knowledge, filling soil status from collected data into database like BDS. And also the BDS, more specifically, allows public transparency. So sharing general soil information to everyone is a good thing for transparency. And yes, we see with the few years of application of the decree soil, we see key issues. So yes, it's setting up soil certificates require important administrative means, financial and human. For the moment, there is a legal uncertainty about when you burn a site who is potentially polluted. You have no obligation to make a soil and groundwater study. Transitional phase with formerly laws because there were other laws older who are not so compatible with the new, and yes, type of use still compatible, I say. And also too complex laws leads to difficulties to communicate the environmental information to notaries, architects, land developers. And about the BDS in Wallonia is not based on soil quality as such. So it's only binary information or no information on soil. You have no quality on the BDS momently. Soil quality data made public, where to place the cursor in the data, because you can give to the public detailed reports from expert soil, or yes, you must find a limit to give information also to, you must limit the transparency, I would say, yes. Next slide, please. Thanks. About the other side, the traceability in Wallonia. So when you move soil in Wallonia, yes, there are. It was a good thing for us and for customers about this. And as you see, for the year 2021, more than 8 million cubic meters were moved with a certificate soil. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. And so, like the decree soil, we also see benefits and also things to ameliorate and continuous improvement for the traceability. So yes, the advantage, as you see, increase in customer protection, transparency and traceability of soil quality. Also an efficient IT environmental create to assure soil traceability, and things to improve for us and for our customers. Yes, current lack of outlet for certain type of soil quality is leading to increased valorization price. Market is not yet mature. The soil certificate and soil passport based currently on different thresholds can lead to misunderstanding and complex situation. And also, yes, with the new pollutants, like as you see, as you know, asbestos, PFAS, invasive plants, are we is it possible for us to track 100% of it? So yes. Yes. Now it's I give the to say to Marie Jallier from SPAC.
Thank you, Frédéric. Good morning, I am Marie Jallier and I have been working at SPAC company in Belgium for 15 years. This morning, I'm going to share with you our practical feedback about the soil certificate. But first of all, I'm going to explain in a few words what is SPAC. SPAC is a company in charge of the remediation of polluted orphan sites. And for this, we're using regional and European funds. So for example, it is the numbers are on the slide. And I'm going to show you on the map on the left. You can see in red all sites that we are in charge of the remediation near Charleroi. Charleroi is a town where there are a lot of metallurgic activities in the past. Next slide, please. So we are owner of one of certain sites. For example, we are owner of the site on the map. You can see on the photo on the left. And it was a foundry in the past. And it is an orphan site. And we are in charge of the soil and groundwater investigation. And then we are in charge of the soil remediation. So after it's done, we have a site that you can see on the photo on the right, which is a very nice site now, but we are not someone interested in. So the first step that you can see on the next slide, please. So at the end of the remediation works, we have to do a final assessment. A final assessment is a study when we have to check that the remediation works are done as we did, as we think. And we have to fill in the soil certificate document. So in a concrete, in a pragmatic way, the results of the final assessment is a scientific report. And the most important information that we have, it is at the end, when we have a map, which explain what is authorized and what is forbidden. So what activity is authorized and what is the use restriction, we say. The use restriction are given because we have a risk assessment tool to know what we can do and what we cannot do on the site. When it is finished, this final assessment, the first step is to give the final assessment report and the soil certificates we prepared to the authorities for approval. Next slide, please. So we prepare soil certificates, and I'm going to show you what is it. So it is French, so there is a translation. Ingrid, could you go to the next slide? So what you can see on the soil certificate, we can see the address, the number of the parcel, the area, the address, and what the use we want to go. So for this, we want to go to a residential use for this site. And we know there is different land use in Wallonia, so we write on the soil certificate that we can go to a residential or recreational or industrial use if you want. And then, because we have done a risk assessment, we say that we have use restriction, and it is very important for the user of the site to know that. For example, here, the use restrictions are that the movement that soil that are at the depth, in the high depth, cannot come back to the surface. It is forbidden. The second one is that if we want to excavate the soil, we have to follow the excavation legislation. And there are some membranes and geotextiles where we meet around the parcel, and we have to take care of them if they are overworked after. And about the buildings, because we have done the risk assessment, we cannot authorize the building with a crawl space of the slab and grab. Sorry, basement is forbidden, and we can authorize a crawl space and slab and grab. So it is the use restriction. Another kind of management measure can be, for example, groundwater survey during a few years. For example, it is not on this site, but it could appear. And after, you have a map where everything is noted. If the final assessment is okay by the government, the soil certificates are signed by the authorities. Next slide, please. Then one day, land developer is interested in this land and want to buy it. So he has a development project with buildings and houses. So we can check that this development project is adequate with the land use we propose, because it is a residential use. Next slide, please. So when the future owner wants to know if he can buy the site, he looks at the state of soil in the database, BDES, it is free. And he looks at the parcel that you can see on the map on the left is in orange color. So he needs information, and he can see that there are soil certificates which are available in this database, and the buyer can have this information directly to give for to buy the field. Next slide, please. So we are preparing soil certificate for 2 years now, and we can see advantages of it. The advantage is that we have a very good identity card of the site, and it is very important to keep in mind the information as sale after sale. So it goes to a guarantee for the foreigners land developers. We meet this situation at SPAC that foreign land developers were reassured because they are soil certificates. So this is a good transparency principle, because when we buy some land, you don't have hidden pollution. But there are some difficulties to develop this, because it, as Frederic has already said, it is cost and time consuming for authorities to put everything in movement. It takes time, so it takes money, and it takes time to validate the soil certificate. So you must be organized. In SPAC, we met a problem with the transitional phase, because we have a lot of sites which were remediated before the soil certificate implementation. So we have to put them in the new system. So it takes time. And the last point is that the problem is the communication to people. We have problems to communicate information to notaries, to architects, to land developers, because we have to explain to them what is in the soil certificate, what they can do and what they cannot do on the land. And it takes time too. So because we are different, it's different. And then the risk that we can have when someone look on the map, on the BDES map, he looks that the land is in orange color, and maybe he could think that it is a risk of the loss of the value of the land. So it was the different feedback from staff. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Marie. So now, when we talk about soil health, and as Rita told us, soil health is at the base of good chemical, biological, and physical conditions. What we have in our system currently is just targeting the chemical phase and only the pollutants, so inorganics or organic. So to get towards soil health, it's another challenge, let's say, because you need to have your building blocks acting also for the other parameters. So databases, obligations, and actors. And we currently have those 4 types of documents running for pollution. Next slide, please. On the databases, what we can use is that we have like a centralized geoportal gathering all kinds of information, geo-reference information. And in such portal, we have information about, of course, the soil map, geological maps. We have information from remote sensing processes like land use, land cover, and DVI. Of course, we have the BDS right there, but we have also information of organic carbon, erosion risks, and also information about sensitive ecosystem for biodiversity based on soil. And also there is a link to the agricultural parcels that are in the CAP system. So we know that we have some data over there that would allow us to broaden the concept of soil quality from pollution to soil health, but this has to be organized properly. Next slide, please. And beyond those parameters, biological, chemical, and physical parameters, the soil strategy goes a bit further as well, because we head towards ecosystem services provided by soils, which are listed there. So we also need to do that further step from parameters assessment to soil ecosystem services scoring. So the question we have right now is how to integrate it in the current system working in Wallonia. And as such, we are waiting also for the discussions that will be taking place this morning to have also experience from your side. Next slide, please. With that, we thank you very much for your attention and happy to answer any question. Thank you.
Yes, let's see if we have any questions now. I'm not sure, Shita, if you're checking the chat, or if we have anyone who would like to put the question.
I see a question just got in, Yvonne.
Yes.
Laurent, do you want to pose it yourself? Or shall I read it out?
Yes, Laurent Pouillot from Surplus Remediation in France. I would like to know if buyers can get the soil studies when they get the soil certificate, or do they only need the certificate and can do what is allowed on the site without studying the technical reports?
So what you can have access to is the database online, and there you can download the soil certificates when they have been validated. And if you want to go further in the soil certificates, you have the reference of the soil study or the scientific reports, and there you need to ask to have access to it. It's not like that directly available, but based on the Aarhus Convention, you can go and ask for the administration to go and consult that report. And this is actually done by the soil experts quite a lot when there are different soil experts taking care of one parcel. So, yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. I guess maybe we can move on, otherwise we will have...
Yes,
there is one more.
Okay. Ingrid, would you put on the next slide? Yes, perfect. Thank you very much. And thank you to all the speakers that gave us a background on both the passports and certificates. We will move on to have examples from other countries. We work in SOILveR a bit interested in if there are other countries or how many countries, and if there are examples of countries that already have these kind of systems with certificates and passports. So we sent out a questionnaire with the help of the Common Forum network and also the Nicole network. And we had responses from representatives of several countries. And we actually simply asked the question if these countries have soil certificates already in their country, or if they have some kind of similar system that play an equivalent role. And we just got a positive answer positive answers from Belgium and the 3 regions. I don't think you call it regions, but I will call it that for now. And we will have another example a bit later today. And we also had some comments that countries had similar systems. And we saw in the comments, for example, then for soil certificates, that we have almost all countries that answered, they had some kind of similar systems, or at least compartments, some compartments that are similar. It might be that they had several systems that add up together to actually address the same aspects when buying and selling properties, for example. And we also had several comments that they usually relate to contamination, not that often to other soil quality indicators. But as we can see here, we have several countries that already have some at least part of these soil certificates components. We can move on to the next slide. And when it comes to soil passports and traceability, we saw almost the same pattern. That we just had one country that had the soil passports in place, but we also already have some things in place in the other countries. So what we would like to do is to try to complete this map and get examples from other countries to see what we have in different countries. And we will also, at the end of this seminar today, or this workshop today, ask you what benefits you see with this kind of system, if you think that there would be an added value, or if you think that your own system and where you come from would actually be sufficient, or possible to adjust with components from the soil passport or from the soil certificate system. But now we will have some comments or presentations from some of the countries, and we will start with Eddie Wille from Flanders, who will give a little presentation about the system in Flanders. Please welcome Eddie Wille.
Thank you very much. I sent my presentation yesterday. I don't know if you have it online now. Okay, thank you very much. Well, I will give you a short introduction on how we are dealing with data management on contaminated sites in our region. I'm working at OVAM, the Public Waste Agency in Flanders, and I was involved in the changes between 91 and 96 when the new legislation came into force. On the next slides, I will give you some of the, let's say, the history and the evolution on that system. Next slide, please. Thank you. Well, when we started in the early 90s, we had also, let's say, reports on soil contamination, but there were not that many. Our estimations now are that we only had about 20 reports each year, so that's not very much. And it was also because of the fact that there was no legislation which was enforcing the fact that people should introduce reports on soil quality at OVAM. So one of the main elements of the new Soil Remediation Act of '95 was that what is called in this slide forced by decree, that in certain conditions, companies or owners, landowners should introduce reports. And that was the basic part of that new legislation, that because of that organized input of data, that we could set up also what we call now a land information register. In those days, the first name was the Register of Contaminated Lands. In fact, this name was renamed because not all plots of land which were investigated were also contaminated. So that was the reason why we reformed it and renamed it in the Land Information Register. It was working, because what you see in a few figures over here is that was the fact that we have delivered 3.5 million soil certificates till now, that also 43,000 soil investigation reports were introduced at OVAM and evaluated. So that means that we can also deliver a lot of information on soil quality, especially at what we call potential contaminating sites. That means that we have chosen a risk of activities which we think that they are polluting the soil, that on those sites you should also have much information. And if you look at the map beyond, then you see that our main data collection or gathering is in also the industrial region. So the plots you see is also in the harbor regions and also around the highway and the canal system. So where the industry was located, we have also quite a lot of information on the soil quality. So what we are not doing is making a new pedological map of the soil in Flanders. So that's not our main goal. We are collecting data on contaminated, potentially polluting activity sites. Also an important element is, of course, that we are not only investigating the soil, but that we are also undertaking remedial actions. Until now, about 6,000 remedial actions have started up. So this is the basic element of the system, an organized introduction of data at OVAM, storing it in a database, the Land Information Register, and then also introducing the information on the responses, which sites were remediated and so on. Next slide, please. A basic element in this whole system was the fact that we are delivering soil certificates. So for each plot of land which is introduced in the Land Information Register, we are also making what we call a soil certificate. It gives you identification of the land plot, the validated reports which are introduced in the Land Information Register, and also the consequences of the encountered contamination. So all these reports, as you can see in the figure above on the right, is introduced by what we call accredited soil remediation experts. So those companies or people are making the reports and introducing them to OVAM. What's an important element of working in that way is that we have also, first of all, quality and control, who is execute the reports, who is doing the work on the field. And also we have specific standards, not only on the way the report should be made, but also on the metadata. So we can also exchange now online, web-based, the metadata of the reports about sampling, analysis, and so on. This was not a fact in the beginning. So you should also keep in mind that we started in '95. There were nearly no geographical information systems, no GPS. Only hard copies were introduced at OVAM. So this is really an important change. If you want to store a lot of data, you should do it also in a way that it's completely organized by web applications. So this is currently the fact. Also, if we are delivering soil certificates, also that is, especially with notaries, is web-based. So 95% of the soil certificates which are delivered by OVAM, it's about 300,000, like between 250 and 300,000 a year, is on a web-based manner. So that's important. But now, what's one of the limitations of the system? In those soil certificates, you don't see a detailed description of the site history, the results of the investigations and remedial actions, and also a detailed photograph of the land, of the plot of land, of the site. Also, the geographical data which are available in our database are limited, especially for the first 10 years. Nearly no georeferenced information was in our database. So making geostatistical maps was not an option in those days. So it was more fixed on an alphanumerical database as we know it from, let's say, the 90s. So that's one of the limitations we have. This is countered now. We have now more georeferred information, but that's from, let's say, the last 10, 15 years. We have also new initiatives. We have seen that the soil certificate is giving, let's say, basic information, and people based on that information can also contact OVAM to have a look on the reports, but that's very time consuming. What we are doing now is sharing more data online. What you can see, for example, is on the right beneath that there is a web viewer under the landfills in the region of Flanders. So it's containing about 2,500 or 600 landfill sites. I won't discuss them in detail during this session, so don't worry. What we are also doing is more evaluating and working with the data which are available. So we are now also making opportunity maps in order to find out where can we introduce certain land uses, for example, solar panels or more afforestation, and also detect more regional patterns. For example, PFOS was really one of the elements which are crucial in our policy last year, but before we had also regional patterns on heavy metals such like cadmium and zinc in the north eastern part of Flanders. So this is something pretty new that we are doing, sharing more detail, more data, and also acting more on our data or by our own. Next slide, please. If you're talking about contaminated sites, not each site should be remediated, but you have also quite a lot of activities, for example, excavations on those sites. And then we also want to guarantee that contaminated soil or enriched soil is not entering up everywhere in our region. So that's why we introduced a policy on excavated soils, aiming at the standstill principle, that we say if we have certain soil qualities in our regions, we won't have it lowered by putting excavated soil on it. So this is the whole concept which was introduced. It's not, let's say, for each kilo that it's leaving your site, we are talking about 250 cubic meters, unless you have a site which is potentially contaminated. And that's also one of the elements why we want to share much more data, that the information that we have already data on the soil quality or on the activities on a certain land plot can take into consideration if you're starting up your activities of excavation and afterwards your building program. There is also a traceability procedure, and all transport should have a waybill in order to have a full traceability from the excavation till the moment when the material is deposited elsewhere. On the next slide, we have some schemes. Thank you. This is an overview. I have a limited time, so this I will just remain to the global overview. We have also the soil remediation experts which are involved in the control of the land. So what they are doing is what we call making up a technical report. And that's also one of the new elements we are now working on. All that information is evaluated by a soil management organization. You saw in the presentation the people from Voltaire. Well, we have similar organizations, and they're also collecting all those technical reports and then adding their conclusions, what can be done with the soil which is investigated. One of the new elements is that we also want to bring in all that information in our geoportals and also do some more geostatistical analysis on that in order to also find out certain patterns of enrichment or contamination. So this is also pretty new. We are working on it at this moment, so it's work in progress. But this is one of the limitations we had also in the past. Not that many web-based applications, and also the, let's say, the GPS and geographical information systems in those days were very limited. So this is the work in progress in order to do that. From the moment the technical report is evaluated, you will have a conformity, and the whole system can start up by excavating, transporting the soil. You have also, due to the traceability, the fact that you need those waybills, and also when it's entering up at the site, you also have a soil management report, so which is also stating clear what was the quality and how was it brought on the land and accepted on that site. So this is a bit the whole system. Also, there is a distinction between waste and soil materials. So as I mentioned, if you are talking about demolition waste, fly ash, slags, you name it, this is really not considered as soil. So if we're talking about excavated soil, you are taking into account is also dredged materials, and of course the traditional soils we are excavating, what we also describe sometimes as technosoils. But from the moment that you're really talking about layers with construction and demolition material, then you have the system which is organized by the colleagues from the waste management department. If you're talking about the contaminated sites, we are also discussing, if we're talking about soil remediation, the risks. In case of excavated soils, we are not discussing about the risk only, it's based on standards. So we have threshold values which allow you to bring soil for free use, restricted use, or sometimes you have first to clean it up or landfill it. So we have several threshold levels in order to make it work. It's not, let's say, a viable option to base that on risk assessment, because the risk on the site where it's leaving might be completely different at the site which is accepting the land. So this, so far my presentation, in a nutshell, how we are dealing with databases, soil certificates, and a policy on excavated soil. Maybe I can also say on the last slide, you will see also an article that we published. I published it yesterday on ResearchGate because the time is now very limited. So if you want more information, detailed information on how data management and collection is organized, you will find it over there. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Eddie, and for a very interesting talk. And I will ask Rita if we have any questions in the chat.
Yeah, there's one, Eddie, asking what are the use restrictions when the total volume is below 250?
Well, if it's below 215 and it's not coming from a site where we had potential polluting activities, you have free use. So it's only if it's less than 250, but it's a potentially when you have an industrial activity, even from the first kilo, you have to investigate it. So there are no restrictions if it's lower than 250 and not on a, let's say, on a green field. The only thing is that if you're really excavating in large quantities from 3.5 cubic meters, you have also to, let's say, way bills for transport, and then also you have, let's say, control of the quality. But also this is a bit what we are also telling our people. You have, let's say, the legislation which is protecting the environment and health. We are really focusing on the real problems. But if you have let's say, small activities or excavations, or you want to accept soil, please ask also for quality guarantees. So the parallel waste management regulation, no, we have a separate legislation for waste and excavated soil. So this is, yeah, there is a difference with the question I saw from Germany. Or yeah, so there is a distinction. We really chose for separate rulings.
Okay. Thank you. Then, well, Esther, you had a comment. Would you like to? Was that a comment or a question? I just saw it in the chat.
It was just an answer to one of the questions to clarify the management of excavated soils, because indeed, due to the waste directive, excavated soils are wastes. unless they are reused on the same site of origin. But then the waste regime is not enough to handle such a management. So we use also the soil decree legal basis and the tools provided by the soil decree to manage those soils. So actually excavated soil is a double related legislation, sort of.
Thank you. So thank you very much, Eddie, for your contribution and sharing the Flanders example. And we will move on then to get some comments from Denmark, and Christian Andersen has been willing to say a few words on the Danish systems.
Yeah, thank you very much. Could you go to the next slide, please? So I'll say a bit about data, because data, of course, is the basis for any sort of soil certificate. And the inventory in Denmark is managed decentrally by the 5 regions. Originally, they were separate databases. They still are, but it is now the same system. So you have 5 versions of the same systems placed in one in each region. The reason it is not one database has something to do with legal requirements, but it is updated into a national database every night, and also in the last few years we have built up databases with where we have the analytical data, so the borehole information, the analytical information of soil and groundwater and vapor is also collected in the regions, and it is uploaded to a central national database. And it is from these databases that we can generate a soil certificate. Next slide, please. So this certificate is only concerning soil contamination. So I don't know in a European soil strategy or soil directive sense if it would fulfill the requirements there. So the certificate itself is really not that much data. The real data, the analytical data, is not a part of the soil certificate. You have to go to a different database for that. What is generated in terms of the soil certificate is if it is registered as on what we call knowledge level 1, which is potentially comminated, meaning we know that activities with which potentially can contaminate has taken place, or on knowledge level 2, which is where we have done sampling and analysis, and we have seen that there are guideline values have been exceeded for the soil of the property. So here on this map, you can see the blue ones are the ones which is potentially contaminated, and the red ones are the ones where we have knowledge that there's actually a measured contamination. Then there you can also see there are some brown ones, and they are the ones which has been removed from the register during this process. Yes, so here you can access it if you want to buy or sell a property. Next slide, please. It is not a legal requirement that you don't buy. It's not according to the law that you need a certificate in buying and selling properties. It is something that people do by themselves, and we make this service available. So basically, we have fulfilled this legal obligation if it comes into law in a European practice, but it is not a part of our law as for the moment. So here, this is just, I would prefer to show it online live, but it always goes wrong. And to be honest, it's not a very good system because it's very old. I think we implemented, and this is a real-time database. It is almost real-time. It is updated every night. So it has been in place for about 10 years, and the user interface is really not very good with modern standards, but it works. So here you can see I've selected polygon, a blue polygon, so it's a potentially contaminated site, and it is, you can see on the screen dump to the left, you can see information on this site, and if I click on the link below, next slide please, then I generate a soil certificate, and it doesn't really have that much information. It's just basic information such as what is on the site, what is the cadastral number, what level, if is it mapped on, is it knowledge level 1 or 2. We also have a distinction between certain kinds of risk. If it is a knowledge level 2, it can also be stated there. Next slide. It has generally just 4 pages. The second part here is an explanation of what you can see. What is the map showing? Next slide. And that is the soil certificate. And we issue a lot of these. Here you can see a timeline. Back in 2009, it was done manually. You had to send in a request to the regions, and they had to go through the database and then make a reply. And it was very cumbersome work, and a lot of people were employed just in replying requests. Then you can see the number of inquiries. The high dot is the total number of inquiries. The second one is the number of web-based inquiries, and the lower figure is the number of manual inquiries. So you can see what happened when we went digital around 2010, 2012, is that the number of inquiries rose. There's been a bit less manual inquiries, but actually the fact that we went digitized mainly just resulted in many more inquiries. The good thing, and I didn't include that on this graph, is that we have also measured the cost in answering these inquiries, and it is a curve moving the other way. So we had a very high cost in fulfilling these inquiries, answering these inquiries 10 years ago, and it has fallen steeply today. And that is both in absolute terms and in time or money per answer. It has become a lot more efficient. The next slide. So that's the story about the certificate. About the soil passport, I'm a little uncertain about the meaning of this in terms of the soil strategy. There is an analytical report produced at the moment. If it is a registered property, registered potentially or contaminated property, or if it is a part of an old city core, as the city core was in 1945, then it is mapped as a urban soil zone, and if it is in one of these two categories, then there's an obligation for a developer or entrepreneur to analyze and report the soil being excavated, and if it is moved to an official soil fertility, he can do it straight away. If not, the municipality, who is the authority here, has to approve of this. But there's no analytical requirements, and hence there's no soil passport outside these zones or related to things other than contaminated or likely contaminated soil. Next slide. This system has also been largely digitized, but it is and it has grown together. So most municipalities are using this soil web solution, where you see a screen dump there, and it is not for citizens use. So you need a special user credentials to log in, and there you do the reporting. And you maintain the communication with the people receiving the soil and the authorities approving the delivery. It is not one system for everyone. It is, most municipalities are using this system, but there are other systems as well. There's an executive order which is describing the general setup of these soil passports, so to speak. But there's not completely uniform requirements in terms of analytical demands or methodology. So that could be mainstreamed a bit more, I think. Yes, so that was what I had about these two topics.
Thank you very much, Christian. We have a question for you from Michelle Gadella, sorry for the pronunciation, from the Netherlands. Does your register also contain information on the sites that have been remediated and sites that have been investigated and appear to be non-contaminated?
Yes, if you go back to the map in the beginning, further. One more there, you see, yeah, one forward, two forward now. Yeah, there you can see there is an orange. If you've seen the bottom of the legend, there's an orange and a brown category, and the orange one is at any point during the production line, the analytical line, you can remove a site from the register. You can do it after it has been registered as potentially contaminated. That can be either if you do a physical investigation and find it is not contaminated, then you can remove it from the register. That's the brown one. Or you can register it and then you can remediate it, and if it's actually clean enough to not be contaminated anymore after remediation, then you can also remove it from the register. That is the orange one. Of course, most of the time after you remediate, you'd still have some remaining contaminants in the ground, so even it will still be marked as contaminated and be read. But yeah, that's the two other categories.
Thank you, Christian. There was another question from Esther here. Removal is only for the register, but information is kept on the map.
Yeah. Yeah, you can see here the sites on the. You can see in this map the sites which were registered have been removed, but they're still registered, but not as contaminated or potentially contaminated.
Okay, thank you very much. And we will have an example from the UK, where Nick Wellenbrock will from Clare will give us examples from the UK. So we'll move on, and then we will also go to France and Austria after that. So please, Nick, welcome to.
Good morning, everybody. Hope you can all hear me okay. Apologies, first of all, I wasn't able to prepare a set of presentation slides for you all. Been a rather busy week, so you'll have to make do with me just describing what we do here, unless of course it's possible if I can share my screen. I do have one slide I can use. I don't know if that's possible at all.
Yes, I will give you into to share. You can now share, yeah.
So you'll be seeing a PowerPoint screen there.
Yes.
So Claire has run an initiative for soils reuse in England and Wales since 2009 called the Clare Definition of Waste Code of Practice. So hence the DAOCOP acronym that we frequently use around this. It is primarily linked to sites that are working under planning permission for development. So this is a system which relies on land quality methodologies, site investigation and risk assessment, as opposed to being a waste management tool. Two things are often very strongly linked, and decisions around whether soil is a waste or not are, as we all know, complicated to say the least. But our system has been running since 2009, as I said, in England and Wales, and has been applied, well, more than that now. This was until the end of last year, so over 8,300 applications, accounting for over 140 million meters cubed of soil. And that soil could be clean, naturally occurring, and some of the uses will also be contaminant impacted, used where appropriate. And by that, I mean ensuring no degradation of the environment or human health, and in line with an appropriately detailed quantitative risk assessment. In terms of soil passports, we have, within the system, all projects must create what we call a materials management plan. And within that, they have what we call a series of lines of evidence. So site investigation of both donor and receiver sites, that risk assessment, remediation strategy, and plans for verification. Alongside that, they must also have a detailed tracking plan. And there are minimum requirements of what must go in that tracking system, including final placement, locations, geospatial plans, and maps. Now, when a project seeks to apply the DAOCOP, that materials management plan and those lines of evidence are submitted to an independent qualified person who will review them. And if satisfied that the code of practice has been prepared for appropriately, they will submit what we call not a passport, but a declaration to declare. And so that's what you see this number here. So that's where an independent individual has assessed the projects as being compliant and having all the requirements in place, including that full tracking system from donor site to receiver site. Now, those declarations come into us, Claire, and the map you see is just a visual snapshot of the sort of front end of our database. In those declarations, we get the full details of the actual addresses of sites of origin, donor sites, and then the receiver sites. That may go down to kind of national grid reference level detail, and sometimes further, depending on how big detailed the project is. So hence we're able to create that database there. We share that information then with regulators of England and Wales, our Environment Agency and Natural Resources Wales. They have immediate and full access whenever they need that data. The biggest phase of work for us, I guess, at the moment is improving our systems such that the tracking evidence, the tracking system, which all projects have, can key into our database. So more of that live data can be on our database. At the moment, we would have to ask the projects to submit a lot of it to us if we wanted to go into a greater degree of detail. Inevitably, the evolution of this is to have more of that captured on our system. Currently, the way that is going is there are a number of third-party developers creating tracking software and operating in the UK. We're quite keen to encourage that, as opposed to trying to develop a one-size-fits-all system by Claire. Our requirement is simply that the minimum requirements of the DAOCOP are met by those systems, and that they can report into our database. Who creates them, how clever they want to go with them, that's entirely up to those folks, and good luck to them. We will simply remain open and say, as those products become available, you can speak to our database developers to ensure that there is that read across. The final kind of graph there just gives a sort of snapshot. So these terms that you'll see, site of origin is obviously materials dug and reused on the same site from which they came. Direct transfer in red there, that's the movement of clean and naturally occurring materials only. And then a far smaller fraction of the pie is for those brownfield materials. So really, there's a lot of work to do to encourage more reuse of those types of soils. Obviously, the risk is higher or is perceived to be higher. So there's quite a communication job around that. And we're trying to work on creating the conditions for more fixed treatment facilities to try and hold, remediate and track those types of materials in the hope that they would provide both greater control and greater confidence to the market. So I think the final part to say is we're starting a redraft of our system with our national regulator, the Environment Agency, and tracking is very much a focal point of our work and our ideas. So I expect that to be beefed up a lot over the coming year. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We don't have any questions in the chat, but do we have, yes, let's see here. Do you see something like an electronic signature as an accountable signature for the data input into your system?
Yeah, so the qualified persons that I mentioned, they're all registered with us, trained and registered by us. They're not CLARE staff, they are usually consultants in the industry of a demonstrable standard. They all have a unique login and identifier into the system, so we know who is submitting the records as well. And we regularly audit their work and the work of the projects submitting the MMPs as well.
Okay, thank you. When you were talking about that it was possible to have different systems or develop individual tracking systems, what are the benefits as opposed to have one central system, so to speak?
Well, I would say CLARE is often we're a lot smaller organization than people realize. So it's a question of often resources and expertise. And yeah, so software, spending money on software is notoriously a good way of relieving yourself of a lot of money and spending a lot of time in doing so. We like to encourage, CLARE historically is about encouraging the remediation and development industry to best practice. So if they have the ideas and they can bring their knowledge and take the commercial risk, but ensure that the requirements of the system are built in, we're very comfortable with that, as opposed to being too, I guess, top down and it's our system, it must all come through CLARE. As long as it reads into the database, we consider that most important.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we will move on then, and we will have a short presentation from, let's see, it's Samuel Coussy from BRGM in France, to hear a little bit about the France systems.
Yes.
Welcome, Samuel.
Thank you, Yvonne. Good morning, everybody. I'm Samuel Coussy from BRGM in France, which is a French geological survey. I present the equivalent of soil certificates and soil passports in France today. So next slide, please. Thank you. So what could be the equivalent of soil certificate in France? We have a system called soil information sectors, which is a system implemented with the law for access to housing and renovated urbanism, implemented in 2014. And this system represents areas where knowledge of soil contamination justifies the carrying of soil studies and contamination management measures to preserve public health and the environment. So those areas, in fact, are areas where we know that there is a contamination. This system is included those documents are included in all urbanism documents. So this is a national database with area where we can see areas of those soil sectors. And in the case of construction on a soil information sector, an environmental consultancy must produce a certificate of completion of soil studies, which is called ATES Allure. Allure, it is the name of the law, Allure law. So this is a kind of equivalent of soil certificates, but next, please. Thank you. To my mind, it is the opposite of the concept of soil certificate that is under discussion with the European Union, because the concept of the European Union is based on soil health, you know, but a soil information sector, it is, we can call it an unhealthy soil, in fact. So to my mind, it's not really the equivalent, but kind of. Next, please. There is also another law called Acceleration and Simplification of Publication, implemented in 2020. And in the context of this law, only in the case of rehabilitation of an installation classified for environmental protection, there is an obligation to certify the implementation of safety measures, the adequacy of proposed rehabilitation measures and their implementation. So this is another document called ATES Travaux. It is an attestation. So this is a certificate. And in this case, next, please. This is a certificate for unhealthy soils, in fact, but that have been rehabilitated. So maybe we are more closer than the definition of a soil certificate. But as we can see here, this is not really the same thing that the concept of soil certificate that would be implemented by the European Union, in fact. So this is it for soil certificates. For soil passports in France, we have now a national registry of waste, excavated soil and sediment. This is an obligation. This is it comes from a new law implemented in 2020, and this law is called Anti-Waste and Circular Economy Law, AGEC law, in fact. So what is it? It is a national electronic database where all producers and users of excavated soils and sediments must report their streams above 500 cubic meters. So there is no obligation below. So the declarants to this database are persons producing or treating excavated soils and sediments, persons carrying out an operation to reuse those excavated soils and sediments, and the persons operating a transit or grouping facility for excavated soil and sediments. So a lot of people have to declare, have to report in this database. However, transporters are not concerned by the transmission to this electronic registry. And this registry, the aim of this national registry is for national and local authorities to control the streams of excavated soils and sediment and also to see, yes, for instance, the ratio of soils which are reused, for instance, rather than landfill, for instance. Next, please. So this is not a real soil passport, because there is no traceability document in this system. It's only a registry. However, it is mandatory. Next, please. We have an obligation to report to this database since January 2022, but there is still a tolerance period granted until the end of this year for transmission deadlines for this year. So people have to report all their streams by the end of 2022 for this year. So we can see here the access to this national database with a link with policy, and we have a specific application called RNDTS to declare to this database. Next, please. However, we have, just for hazardous waste and hazardous excavated soil, there is a specific traceability document called Bordereau de suivi de déchets, BSD. So for hazardous excavated soils and sediments, we have a soil passport, in fact, which is a traceability document, but not for uncontaminated soils or non-hazardous soils, for instance. However, we have softwares dealing with this question of traceability. For instance, we have the application Terrace. Terrace is a free platform for actors who reuse excavated soil, producer and users. And the advantages of this platform, this is an interactive soil exchange, which can bring together producers and users of excavated soils. And this platform can edit soil tracking forms. So this is here a traceability document, but this is not mandatory for the moment. So this application is not mandatory, and we have a lot of commercial applications, which can edit a kind of traceability document. So Terrace will be connected to RNDTS, the National Registry, by the end of the year, so that people using Terrace can report automatically to the National Registry, which is mandatory. And a lot of commercial application so will connect also automatically to the National Registry. So we can edit a lot of kind of traceability document, but there is one endpoint for bancarization of data, which is the National Registry. So to my mind, I think this is the equivalent of soil passports in France, to my mind. So I think this is it. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, and for a very interesting presentation and the ongoing and the developments that you are working on. We had one question about the 500 cubic meter limit that you mentioned. If it's also for clean soils or only for?
Yes, for all types of soils. It is the case. It is only the case because we are under the waste law, you know, and so this is only the case for the soils that will go off-site. In fact, So for soil reused directly on site, there is no specific law. There is no need for traceability, in fact, but it is mandatory for all soils that will go off-site for landfilling, but also for reuse, etc. And it is mandatory for either for soils contaminated and not contaminated.
Thank you for that clarification, Samuel, and thank you for your presentation. We will now have a last presentation and last contribution from Austria, given the way we get an example from Marta Wepner-Banco, who is going to tell us a bit about Austria systems.
Yes, thanks a lot, Yvonne. Hello also from my side. I'm Marta Wepner-Banco from the Environment Agency in Austria. I'm working at the Contaminated Sites Department. And today I will give a short overview of the existing routines regarding real estate evaluation, which cover the purpose in a sense of a, let's say, a kind of soil health report, and which is of course very helpful in terms of transparency in real estate transfers and transactions for the seller as well as the buyer. Next slide, please. So talking about brownfields and used surfaces, as we all know, the main obstacles to start a revitalization process are mainly the possibilities of contamination and as well the question of liability. This implies as well, of course, the uncertainties and unforeseeable costs which could arise due to that fact. And the issues, of course, have to be solved in advance on how to overcome these obstacles. What is important to get there is, of course, sound information, which is necessary not even only to start the process of redevelopment, but also to avoid several risks on the ecological, economic, and panel risks in order to achieve informed decision-making and targeted planning of a redevelopment project. The next slide, please. So what is the situation in Austria at the moment, which I would like to talk about in terms of a possible soil health report or certificate? Of course, there is in Austria, every land transaction a matter of civil law, and it involves the seller and the buyer of a land. In Austria, the notaries regularly check the available information. For example, whether a site is registered in the database of contaminated sites, of potentially contaminated sites. For example, it can be entered via the real estate number, and then it pops up whether this site is registered in our cadastre of potentially contaminated sites. So he can check up this information. And on the other side, there are standard contract provision. In order to avoid hidden legacies and to ensure a transaction regulating the risks and liability. What else do we have in Austria? On the real estate market, there are two standards existing. One standard is from the construction sector. It's called the ÖNORM B 1802. This regulates the real estate valuation. And on the other side, there is a standard, an Austrian standard for the contaminated site, from the contaminated site sector. This relates to the survey and assessment of the environmental status of used surfaces for the real estate evaluation. What else have we got, which is publicly available, is in terms of the existing legislation for contaminated sites. Here we collect information on historical polluting activities. These are all activities which have been happening before a certain date. In Austria, it's the date of the 1st July 1989. And this respective database contains information of around 70,000 sites at the moment, but publicly available is the is only the register of the sites where investigation have resulted in a high risk that the site is either seriously contaminated or has the significant risks. And at the moment, there are around 330 sites integrated and publicly available in this register. And also the sites which have been prioritized for investigation. And since several years, there is a revision of our legislation planned. And as soon as this revision is out, then we have more information publicly available, because then the database will also include sites which have been investigated, but which are not, so either not serious contaminated or don't have a significant risk, but all the results will be publicly available and will be made public as soon as this revision of the legislation is out. Next slide, please. Here I will come back to the Austrian standard S2093. The aim of this standard is to identify potentials and drawbacks of a real estate due to the environmental status, yeah, and making information transparent and checking for plausibility is of course a key for planning and redevelopment of this site and for allowing sound cost estimates, yeah, how much will these burdens be costing in future and so on, and also to know how a project shall be planned. And this standard is very transparency for the buyer and the seller in several terms. First of all survey activities and results are reported, and the relevant indications on contamination and information gaps are also named out clearly. And there are options and suggested to overcome information gaps also, and as well, which is also reported, are proportionate alternatives. And this is of course very essential, this verified data, in order to ensure an economic, legal, technically sound process and to minimize economical and ecological risks for future development projects. The next slide, please. As a conclusion, we want to say that we feel that soil status reports are routine in the real estate market in Austria already. This is for providing sound information on the environmental status in a transparent manner, and as well creating transparency in land transaction and to reduce economic risks. And there exists already appropriate frames and guidances in Austria, which are generally accepted in the everyday routines. For example, the standard I just mentioned before. And now back to the beginning of the presentation. In general, we assume that there is no need actually for making soil health reports mandatory. Because any legislative trigger we have made the experience hardly strengthens transparency. But on the other side, a voluntary system which is enhanced by independent reviews to finally come up with a certificate, which is now the topic, may encourage as well the private sector to take responsibility, to share information, and to look out for land stewardship. You can go to the last slide, thank you. In former times, we have made the experience that there was often not sufficient clarity regarding contamination or hidden surprises within a land transfer. But in Austria nowadays, the buyer is more protected against these obstacles due to the civil law, due to purchase contracts, due to also common business practices regarding the real estate transfer, and last but not least, also due to the standards existing in Austria. At least here we in the last years, we very seldom were confronted with frauds regarding real estate transfer. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marta. This is very interesting to hear, especially the last part that you mentioned with the frauds. And
Yeah.
Esther has a question. Maybe Esther, you can put it yourself.
Yes, if you want. Thank you, Marta, for your presentation. I was wondering if it was explicitly stated in your law that when there is a transfer of land, you need to go and have a look at the soil registers you have, or if it's just
it's common practice that the notaries, for example, they have a look at this register. It's nowadays common practice. I mean, it's their fault, or if they don't look, they will maybe come up with big problems in the future. So it's nowadays common practice.
But it's
that
not,
they do this. No, it's not compulsory. Yeah.
Okay, so you rely on the civil law, on the general spirit of the civil law of
that's
okay.
Yeah.
Because what we faced as a problem in Wallonia, and we had the soil decree in 2008, but one article wasn't implemented, and that article was exactly related to the transfer of land and to the obligations of consulting available databases. So we could see that if you don't put it like explicitly, at least that's what we face in Wallonia, if you don't put it explicitly, they wouldn't really do it actually. And so that was a big change from our new legislation, because now it's clear for the notaries that they need to have such an extract of the database.
Okay. So it was not common practice, not really?
It depends on the notaries, it depends on many things, and so that was not efficient at that time, at least.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Then I think that we actually have canceled the next presentation. Is that right, Ingrid? Because we have a cancellation of a presentation. Would that be right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yes. Then I guess we are moving to the interactive part. Maybe you have the next slide. Yes, what we are going to try now is to see that when we have around 70 people, it would be kind of difficult to have everyone's opinion in a discussion. So we were going to try the Menti tool. And so that if you log into Menti, either on your phone or if you have two screens on the computer, we will ask a few questions, and they are actually about now that you have heard the background and how the soil passport and certificate systems how they can look like, and also when you have had examples from other countries and maybe you are familiar with your own country, we will try to see if you have any comments now, and we will actually see them on screen. And we will start by a question to see which country you are from, just to try the Menti out to see that if we have any participants.
Yvonne?
That has, yes.
Would it be possible to put back the code in the chat, because
the code is on the
up. Great.
Still on in there, so we can see that we have many participants from Belgium, Denmark, France is popping up here. What we see is that the larger the letter, the more the people, I think. Several from Sweden as well, and Belgium is split into Brussels as well there, Netherlands. So it seems like it's works just fine. Is France winning? I'm not sure. But we can see that we have participants from many countries, and also when we look at the comments The code, it's you can see it on the top of the presentation that we are sharing now, 4800276. Yes, and it's now also written in the chat, I can see. What will happen is that we will get several comments, and of course this is not a scientific way of saying that some comments will be well, it may be biased. If for example more participants are from France than from Greece, then maybe we'll have more comments from France in our responses, but still we think it might be an interesting way of seeing different views on soil certificates and passports. So now it thinks that this picture has stopped moving, so I think that everyone is in the Menti now and tried it out. So Ingrid, should we try to go forward to the next question? There will be, I think, 3 questions on soil certificates and 3 on soil passports. So let's see if we can move on to the next question. Yes. This one you can answer yes or no, but we would like you to see if you can also comment. We know that it's tricky on the phone maybe to write, but feel free to comment. Is traceability of excavated soils already dealt with satisfactorily or reasonably well, or can be dealt with within existing systems in your country? So now we can already see that answers are popping up, but and they are yes and no's, but feel free to comment. It could be, well, a bit, but it could be better, it could be improved, or something like that. So not really. Let's see, can be improved, must be improved. Okay. Not sufficiently traceability, yes, but proper better reuse should be envisaged. Yes, but this is the beginning. Always room for improvement, must be improved, can be improved. Yes, with document for monitoring and control of tonnage and transport. We can see that we have many comments about that we need to improve the traceability. Yes. So now I think that it's not moving that fast anymore. I guess that we have around 30 answers now. So let's see if can be dealt with, but no mandatory system. Yes. Okay, I think we have now many comments and many answers that suggest improvement. Should we try the next question? Ingrid? Do you think there could be other solutions than soil passports that would suit your country better? And that is, I guess, as presented today, the soil passport system that is kind of more or less an official soil passport system. So this is, I guess, depends on how you interpret the question and how you interpret the passport, but it would still be interesting if you think that there would be, that could be what you were thinking while you heard the presentations, that, well, this would not really fit in my country, but I would think of other systems. important to link to existing system. No double work for projects and industry. Yes. Not so easy to change existing systems. No, that's a good point. No, the soil passport is a good system. Yes. The willingness to do this better and more sustainably, not really just a matter of name of such document. Yes, and we saw in the presentations that there were already different ways of actually tracing, but we still needed improvement in traceability. Ingrid, could you scroll down a bit, I guess? So that, yes. The scope of the should be expanded for all soils that arise from a site. We have some interesting comments here and ideas. And we think it looks like a lot of people also like the soil passport system, that it could be a good option. We have a reasonable system. On environmental declaration of soil quality. The system can be enhanced by adding some extra info on traceability. Okay, there are systems that could be used in some places. Okay. These are interesting comments. No, global soil passports including a few focus, for example, types of uses, pollution compaction. Yes. Okay, I think there also was a third question on soil passports, was it? Or did we have two? Should we move on, Ingrid? Yes, then actually that was the system of land transactions. Is there a system for land transactions that satisfactorily or reasonably well does include soil health aspects? Because several countries had systems for land transactions, but does it include soil health aspects? Yes, we had a yes, and then I don't know. So let's see. Let's give people time to write. Never understood the concept of soil health. Yeah, and that's actually something that is very much discussed, I think, and what would the indicators be of soil health and what kind of soils would it apply to? Is it all soils? Let's see, yes, for soil pollution, not yet for other aspects of soil health. That is interesting because the new law is called the soil health law. So let's see if it's how much health, soil health will be included in the final draft or the final version. Yes, but it does not include information on ecosystem services. It's only on soil contamination. Yes, that we saw also in our in our inquiry that there are many systems related to soil contamination, not that much to soil health. Not that I'm aware of. I think this is essential and passes responsibility on to landowner and makes everything more transparent rather than buyer beware approach. So we can really see that the issue of soil health is tricky. We find it kind of tricky. Yes. So now I think that there are not many more answers coming in, but we can see that there are in many cases systems for land transactions, but well, it's often related to contamination and not to soil health, I guess. Yes. Other aspects would require other research with maybe other dynamics, repetition, etc. Perhaps try to link with private and public initiatives focused on biological and physical aspects. Soil health is a wide concept, and we have to include many parameters to address ecosystem services. Yes. Land, soil, real estate register in Germany, Austria already consists such aspects. Then we have examples already. And I guess it may be that it's some countries are ahead of others, and maybe we would benefit from more good examples. We also had examples of having central systems or having systems that was regarding traceability, but having systems that well, individual companies could develop, for example. So I guess that could be an issue if we should have a central system for Europe, or if the countries should have their own systems. A generic soil health report would not help a farmer. Soil science concepts need to be better embedded within the construction sector and soils management. Okay, do we have a question left, or do we have more questions left? Let's see. Yes, it's a similar question to the one on soil passports. Do you think soil certificates as presented today could provide an added value to your system and also then for soil health? Yes, so let's see what you think about that. Could it provide an added value, or would it not? Can you deal with it yourself in your countries satisfactorily? Yes, yes, yes. In terms of contaminated site, yes. Have it in place. Yes. That is interesting. A lot of yeses. Of course. For transparency in transaction. So maybe that was As a starting point, yes, but there is manifestly room for improvement, especially in terms of traceability. Now I have the longer comments coming up. It is true that they only focus, so lost the comment. Let's see. It is true that they only focus on soil contamination without taking into, I can see, account other fundamental parameters of soil health, hence sustainable remediation, for example, is promoted. It seems like we lose the comments very quickly. They're difficult to read. So I think that we are kind of running out of comments now, and it seems like quite a lot of the participants think that we could actually have an added value to our systems if we use the soil certificates or maybe parts of it in more countries or in our countries. Not many knows. So I think that maybe we can stop there, and that was, I think, an interesting exercise to get you all to contribute, to be able to contribute, even if we are quite a lot of people. Yes, thank you. And let's see then what we had left on the agenda now. If Ingrid will share. There. Yes, I think that I would like to thank you for your contribution here and actually move on to Rita, who is going to have a little final or finishing the talks today.
Thank you, Yvonne. Indeed, great to see all the answers. And maybe just as a last shout out, we showed you earlier this meeting the map of Europe. And we know that certain countries in the soil expert group have also added comments on passports and certificates. We'll be adding to the map with comments that we received in the questionnaire. But if you feel like one of your member or countries is missing, and you would like to be added to this map, since we'll probably put it online with information for everyone to look at. If you feel like you would add something from your member state, then please send us an email or reach out to one of us, and then we can add some information on the certificates and passports in your country, and we can try to come up with a good overview. And like this slide says, we will use that overview as well for the Common Forum Nicole meeting in November in Greece. So we'll make sure to update you afterwards that meeting as well. Next slide, please. Yeah, then I think all that's left to say is we have some information here, so look out for this website where we'll update you about the results from this meeting, and we'll also put the map of Europe online. We'll try to update that regularly in case we get new information, and you can also subscribe to our newsletter and look out for actions for next year. And I think with that, we're at the end of this meeting, and I would like everyone to thank you for being here and adding some perspectives. And we'll hope to see you soon in another meeting, maybe somewhere next year, because we'll be thinking about further exchanges in line with the soil strategy. So thanks a lot, and have a great weekend.